If you recall, at the end of last session, we tried to create a table to help us understand something that happens in parallel. Now, this is not a popular way to think. And some of the things you're going to learn here are unpopular. That's because they're right, but they're unpopular. And the reason they're unpopular is because it's too complex. It makes people confused. So, as you know, I'm inviting you to be confused. In other words, to try to enter into something that's complex enough for one simple reason. If you think this is complex, wait till you see your clients. Human beings are very complex. So simple ways of looking at it make us force our clients into some sort of a model. And so what we want to do is have a model that allows us to think, but not to force our clients into how we think. So we're trying to think in a flexible way, and that is very unpopular. It used to be unpopular. In the 21st century, it's very unpopular because mental health has entered into the twilight zone of pretending that it's connected to engineering. In other words, that things are knowable if you can say that they're known. And it has nothing to do with like whether they're really that way or not. It's just you make a map. For example, those of you who have familiarity with what's called DSM-5, 4-3, DSM-5. DSM-5, you know, the diagnostic statistical manual, which some people call Chas v'Shalom, the Bible of the psychiatry, is a good example of simplistic thinking, which does not correspond to reality and does more harm than good. Because, you know, you come in and somebody's looking to put the numbers on you, and as a result of putting in the numbers, that limits your way to say who is this whole person and how do they work, and that doesn't fit into numbers because people don't fit into numbers, okay? So we're not putting people into numbers here. And when we create models, we create them with reservation. In other words, the field, what goes on in the world, what happens to a human being is always much more complex than what we can possibly put into words and into thoughts. And so we want to say that all this chokhmah that we're spending 2 years learning is a small part of what is reality. The bigger part of reality is the relationship that we have with our clients. But since we're complicated people and they're complicated people, the relationship is exponentially more complicated, right? And so we can't depend just on the relationship to be able to see our way through. So what do we need? Ways of thinking, right? So usually after the session, sometimes at inspired moments during the session, you say, let me think about this very complex experience and use some of the stuff that we've learned, like to say, but this thing that's going on there, what are the pragmatic meanings and what are the subjective meanings? That's a way of thinking. Is it all of what's going on? Never. So we don't want to create a field which is divorced from reality. We want the field to sort of hover over reality and allow us to find our way in reality in a better way. That's as good as it gets. Going beyond that is not, it is a way of thinking that isn't connected to the field itself. The field itself can't be engineered. Right? Some of the stuff that you'll learn may look a little like engineering. Some of it in family systems is actually imported from engineering. That doesn't make people engineers, right? It's just a way that helps us to think. So that's a way of saying that this complicated chart that we had last time, which I'm sure you've all memorized, is a way of helping us to find our way in sort of an obscure place. It was created, this whole idea was created by Robert Velde. Sometimes a name gives you a hint of something. Wald in German or in Yiddish is what? A forest. A forest. So Robert Velde is in the forest. In other words, it's a little dark, it's hard to find your way, and he's helping us to find some paths in the forest. But the forest is always a place where it's good to think, but how you think about the forest isn't the forest. It's a way of helping you find your way in the forest. So that some of you will now remember the name Robert Velde. And when we get access to it, I will put up in the course a proper Xerox of this article. I didn't have access to it when I used it. So let's just remember that when we deal with the subjective meanings are examined by inner subjective feelings, by hints. In other words, if we want to hear about somebody's associations, what would you think of that? What else do you think about? And we want to hear about people's dreams, which are a marvelous metaphorical way of understanding somebody's inner world. That will lead you to subjective meanings. Pragmatic meanings, what goes on between people, cannot be understood only by associations. You have to observe what's going on. You can be observing it in the room, or you can be observing it with a client and saying, well, when your wife says that, what happens next? Not what happened before it. What happened next? What happened before it is the subjective world. What happens after it is the pragmatic world. Are they connected? Yes. Is one helping to learn the other? Yes. Is it good to decide which is more important? I'll ask you, what should come first, pragmatic meanings or subjective meanings? Hopefully, some of the people on the right here would immediately say, that's what's known as a Klotzkasha, right? I mean, that's a stupid question. Why would anything come first, right? In other words, these things are all important, and you find your way. The world of mental health is divided into politics. There are people who say pragmatic meanings are important. The person who you read the article that we're about to talk about, that's what he said. Only the pragmatic meanings are important. The subjective ones are nonsense. That's a nonsensical statement. What we would help him to say is, you are very good at seeing pragmatic meanings. Some of the people in this room, I hope, will be very good at seeing pragmatic meanings. That's great. Does that mean that the other meanings don't exist? Or that they're just not as adept? Right? Jay Haley couldn't find the subjective meaning in his own dreams. He just wasn't there. He needed to look from a distance and see the map. He was great. He was great at seeing the map. He was horrible at understanding himself. So he gave us a great contribution, except for the part that's negative, right? In other words, he could tell us about that. Let's learn from him about that. The fact that he says there are no subjective meanings, it's just limited. One might say stupid, but let's say limited, right? And when a Freudian says, look, all of the stuff about what goes on in the family is not important because it all derives from inner feelings. So if you understand the individual peoples, which by the way will take you 20 years, so you'll have to deal with the next generation of problems, but when you understand the subjective meanings of people, then you'll understand the family. So understanding subjective experience, they're good at it. They're good at looking inside themselves. They're good at looking inside their clients. They're not good at seeing the pragmatic meanings. So that means they don't exist? It means they don't see them, right? Unfortunately, since people have subjective and pragmatic meanings, and hopefully in the exercise today, you will learn something about your own subjective and pragmatic meanings, we can't afford to be limited because we're dealing with whole people. That is very unpopular, but that's what we're doing here, right? We're trying to hold both of them. Some of you will feel more at home with the subjective meanings. Some of you will feel more at home with the pragmatic meanings, but your clients have both. So it's a challenge. That's the challenge. You had a question.
I was wondering if you could give, we might get to this, but an example of how...
We're about to do that. Yeah, we're going to do that in a second. So the dynamics of the subjective meanings are unconscious. They were there and they were repressed. As a result, to get through them, you have to release anxiety. This is the subjective meanings are meanings that a person does not want to hear about. There's a part of them that says no. And so when you say yes, they feel anxiety, right? That's not the truth. That's not true of pragmatic meanings. When in a session, you say, well, I noticed that after this happens, that happens, you're not releasing anxiety, because it's not that people knew it and repress it. They didn't know it. They didn't know it in the same way that in a group, you never know everything. You know some other things, but you're not fighting against anxiety. When you make an interpretation that's pragmatic, people are happy to hear it. It makes sense to them. It gives them a little bit of a map in the forest. If you make an interpretation that says, well, you really wanted to kill your mother, the average person says, no! And then by the strength of the no, you Of course, if you're afraid, you say, well, that was a strong no, so something's troubling you there, right? So, okay, so then you get into the subjective meaning, but it was under pressure not to know. Pragmatic meanings are not under pressure not to know. Subjective meanings are linear. This causes that. When you feel this, then you do that. If you look at the map, if you know when you feel that you want to get close to mother, then you are frightened by that, and so you make a compromise. That's causal, right? Pragmatic meanings are circular. They go around in a circle. This happens, that happens, this happens, that happens, and then this happens again. That happens again, and this happens again, and that happens again. It's a circle, so it doesn't really, you're not saying what causes something, you're saying how it goes about, how it works. It's very hard for Western people. It's easy for Eastern people, but it's very hard for Western people to let go of causality. We like to know the causes. We like to say, this causes that. But if you think about it slowly, slow thinking is sometimes a good thing. You'll say, well, how do you really know what causes what? You know what came before something. This came before something. That's chronology. Is chronology causality? What would give you the understanding of causality? And the answer is, you make it up. Because you want to understand causality. So you say, if this came before that, this caused that. Then you make a couple of, engineering things about, well, this happens before that, and then if this, that. The same, is that reality? Not exactly. It gets close to reality. We don't really have a way of knowing causality, but we believe that we do in the West. In the East, you say, what caused what? They just laugh. So that makes it easier for them. But the subjective meaning is derivative in causality, which means that in some ways we're forcing the idea onto reality. It's not really there. Now, the function of
pragmatic is not linear. How
it's circular. It's circular in the sense that we have little Hans is afraid of horses, right? Okay, so he's afraid of horses, and then his mother says, well, you're really afraid of horses, come into bed and I'll relieve you of your anxiety. And he comes into bed, and then the father says, what are you doing in your mother's bed? She's spoiling you. Come over here, and we're going to solve this problem. Come out and take it well. And Hans gets more frightened, goes back into the mother's bed, but this thing keeps happening. So you say, well, is it Hans's fear that's causing it, or is part of a cycle that begins with the fact that his parents can't figure out how to raise him, and they're fighting about it, and his fear is caused by the conflict? Or is it created? You don't know, but you see how it works, and it runs in a circle, right? That's an unfriendly thought to the Western mind. We would like to say, no, it starts here. But in things that happen over and over again, we really don't know how it starts. We want to know how it can change. Can you know how something can change without knowing how it starts? Subjective meanings? No. Pragmatic meanings? Why not? Just change the pragmatic meanings. We'll have a whole session about that in the second semester. You see that it's confusing? You see that it's easier to say, I just want to get to the cause of it, or you say, well, let's just change it and be finished with it. Those are easier. Hold both together, that's part of the challenge that we take on ourselves because that's what we're like. We're complicated. Do you have another question?
Why subjectively no, meaning in terms of why did you say subjectively no in terms of changing without knowing
Because that's how we think about subjective meanings. In other words, subjective meanings are based on causal thinking. They don't have to be. It's a very good question. The question was, what's the connection between subjective and causal, right? They're two different ideas. Well, the answer is, the guy I mentioned last time, Dr. Sasso, Freud started it that way. Freud was a causal thinker, and Freud taught us how to think about subjective meanings. And Freud created a whole new area of understanding, which was thinking in a causal way. In other words, because you have this impulse, and because this impulse is uncomfortable, then you make this compromise, right? So that's how that thinking developed. Did it have to? That's a wonderful question, but I don't really know. It's a good question. Good questions are always welcome. When you leave your client, you will leave more with questions than with answers, right? That's a good sign. If you're sure of something, it's not a good sign. So the other thing to remember is that both the subjective meanings and the pragmatic meanings are involved in equilibrium. People try to find a way that life is predictable, that they know where they're home, you know, that let's say at home. But at home, not only good things happen, all kinds of things happen, but it's home, right? So you feel that it's a certain equilibrium. The inner equilibrium is the subjective meanings, right? Hans can live with himself with all of these nasty things that are going on inside of him because he strips it together and makes an equilibrium. Does he know it? No. Or in a pragmatic way, you would say, well, that cycle that keeps happening, that's us. That's us. It isn't comfortable. We say we hate it, but the more we say we hate it, the more we keep doing it. And so apparently it serves a function. And the function is equilibrium. It keeps us knowing that that we stay together. Okay, so now you see the intervention of Freud with little Hans was an interpretation. He said, listen, son, before you were born, remember I told you before you were born, little boys want to take their mothers away from their fathers. And so now that you know that, life will be easy. And it flopped. Didn't work. But that's an interpretation. That's that's what we do when we deal with subjective meanings. When we deal with pragmatic meanings, we change the meaning of the system. And that's what we're going to have a look at now. Did you have a chance to read Haley's article on the modern little Hans? Jay Haley is one of the great founders and great confounders of family therapy because he was so smart that he convinced people that what he didn't know didn't exist. But we're going to look at what he didn't. So there was this family, and it looks an awful lot like Freud's little Hans, right? There's a father and mother, an older brother, and a younger sister. And what we know is that Stuart is frightened of dogs. To end of the 20th century, no horses around. Dogs. Right? So he's afraid of dogs, and what happens is when he's afraid of dogs, his mother protects him. His mother says, "Look, so don't go out. You know, we'll find a way that there won't be dogs, or let's just think about non-dogs or whatever." And his father says, "This kid is everything is unbalanced, but it's unbalanced in a pragmatic equilibrium because it keeps happening, right? If it was not equilibrium, it wouldn't keep happening, it would change. So something is balanced here, and it turns out that the balance is that the father, and this is classic end of 20th century families, all family therapies end up looking like this. The father is under-involved, the mother is over-involved. Naturally, you're blaming the mother for being over-involved instead of the father for being under-involved, but that's free feminism. And that's how the family is balanced. You see, the father doesn't quite know how to be a father. He would like to get closer to his son, one would hope, but his wife doesn't sort of let him because she thinks that he's a man. A lot of men know about raising boys. And so she comes, the kid is afraid of dogs. Now, what does one have to do with the other? Well, if we were Freud, we'd say, how do dogs remind you of your father? Like, how do horses remind you of your father? Remember that? But we're not Freud. We say, how does this work? It works in the sense that when he's afraid of dogs, see, that's the symptom. It has a meaning. He's afraid of dogs, and that creates a cycle where he gets closer to mother and further from father. And when he gets further from father, he's more afraid of dogs. And it goes around in a circle. So what does Haley do? Do you remember the treatment?
Yes. He gets all puppy.
What's that? What?
They get all puppy.
Well, the idea is that, right, we use the symptom of the dog to bring him closer to father rather than further from father. See, we didn't say, stop being afraid of dogs. We said, being afraid of dogs has the meaning of being further from father. Let's use the meaning of being afraid of dogs to get closer to father. And in this case, the father was a mailman. Now, this is sort of like ancient history for you people, but once upon a time, there were people with sacks who went around private homes delivering the mail. And if there was a dog, you had to figure out how to deal with the dog. So the father, who was a mailman, was an expert in dealing with all the dogs of all of his neighbors, people that were in the delivery room. So Haley, in one of his flashes of brilliance, and he had many of them, said, oh, now here's a father who knows about dogs. So you can teach your kid about dogs. Now, who brought up dogs? What does dogs have to do with it? Dogs have to do with the symptom, right? So it takes you the symptom of your boy is afraid of dogs, which makes you say, oh, mama's boy, who can raise him? And do the opposite. Say, I'm going to take my boy, and the two of us are going to learn about dogs. I'm going to take him and show him about dogs. And what happens is that the boy becomes closer to his father. What did we use? The symptom. Did we explain the symptom? No. What did we do? We changed its meaning. We said, you're afraid of dogs, you need your father. Now, is that enough to do the treatment? What about mom? Right? Because there's an equilibrium between dad and mom. So if the boy is going to get closer to his father by being afraid of dogs, so what's going to happen to mom and the boy? And what's going to happen to mom and dad? So you see, what we just said is that we have what's called a triangle. In other words, a triangle has three sides to it. The symptom involves all three sides. The symptom, I'm afraid of dogs, makes me further from father, closer to mother, and makes father and mother less close, because basically dad keeps saying, if you would stop spoiling him, just like Freud's father, if you would stop spoiling him, he would be fine. So the parents have a problem, the father and the boy have a problem, and the boy and the mother have the opposite problem. They're very close, right? So how do we change it? We have to change all three simultaneously, right? So how do we do that? We say, well, you get close to your father with the dog, right? And your mother can look at you as a different kind of boy. In other words, mothers don't want their kids to be afraid. They don't enjoy their kids being afraid, but it sometimes equilibrates things for the kid to be afraid. So if you're not going to be afraid, then we need mom to admire what you're doing with dogs, and you can have a puppy. In other words, that mom is part of a different relationship with the boy. So we've changed the boy's relationship to his father. Dad is bringing him and to his mother. Now what about mom and dad? What are we going to do about that? And the answer is, when the two of you succeed, because it's a family therapy, so the two of you are doing this, I'm telling you how to do it, but only you can do it. That's the truth of family therapy. That we don't do the therapy. We sort of suggest some dotted lines, and then people do it. If they don't do it, it's not family therapy. But the assumption is that they want to do it because they would like to have a better equilibrium. So dad gets closer. Mom sees the boy as more grown up and less as a baby. What are we going to do about mom and dad? We say, well, this is your therapy. You have succeeded. You had a problem, and that problem was that you had a boy who was stuck with fears of love. And you, the two of you, not dad, the two of you have succeeded by changing. Dad changes and mom changes, and you've succeeded, the two of you, in this plan. And so, what do you need to do? Go away for a weekend to celebrate the fact that the boy is no longer afraid of dogs. So, the fact that the boy is no longer afraid of dogs, instead of creating distance between the mother and the father, creates closeness between the mother and the father. So you see, now, we haven't understood why the father and the mother were distant. We haven't understood why the father is far from the boy. We haven't understood why the mother was infantilizing the boy. We haven't understood subjectively a single thing. But we've changed the meaning of the pragmatics of the symptom. Afraid of dogs brings you closer to father, more mature in mother's eyes, and brings the parents together.
So you're saying that, like, the issues between mom and dad, like their strong bias, I guess, preceded the little boy's fear of dogs.
Right, well, you see, no,
And it's like, which came from her saying?
see, you're being very careful, and that's very good. Because if you were being less careful, you would say, well, he caused it, right? In other words, the fact that the mom and dad can't see eye to eye about something, that caused the boy death.
I'm not saying
But you didn't
that.
say that.
Right.
Right? Because we only know that it preceded, but we don't know, because we weren't there, how the causality is. But it see, couples exist before their kids. That's a well-known fact. The couple exists before the kid, right? That's not nuclear science, right? Couples exist. So since the parents exist before the kid, if we think causally, which we're trying to free ourselves from, we would say, what are you dealing with this kid's problems? Undoubtedly, his parents created the problem. That's a causal statement, because they were there first. So do couples therapy. And then you do another regression and say, well, each of the parents existed before they were a couple. So do individual therapy. And so Hans is stuck at the age of 7, afraid of dogs. Each of his parents go into psychoanalysis. And when he's 25, they're finished, and they understood why he was afraid of dogs. But in the meantime, he's hospitalized because things happened in 20 years. So that's a sort of that's not going to happen. But you see why thinking chronologically has to be separated from causally? Now, you're going to have clients that are kind of coming with a kid who's afraid of dogs, or his Rebbe, or somebody, and you're going to say to yourself, you guys existed before the kid, let's do couples therapy. You caused it. If the couple gets better, the kid will get better. We don't happen to even meet the kid. The kid is the part of the therapy. All we need to do is change what caused it. That is popular. You can see why it's popular. It's simpler, right? You never have to meet the kid. And are the parents in trouble? Oh, they're in terrible trouble, because the kid is driving them crazy with this fear of dogs. Oh, I said the word because, right? They're in terrible trouble. Is the trouble because of the kid, or is the kid, in trouble because of the parents? Because is not going to be helpful for us. The question is, how do we change it? So if you say, well, the kid is involved, right? There's something about the way this kid is growing up that involves his being part of the trouble. So we ought to see the kid, right? In other words, we want to make sure that the kid feels, the boy, Stuart, feels that he has a therapist, right? In other words, if we want to treat the system, each of the people, the individuals, including the little ones in the system, need to make me the therapist. And then I can help each one of them to feel that they're part of the solution. If I only see the couple, the kid feels that sort of causality, like, I'm an instrument of my parents. Is that a good way to feel? That's the world's best way to feel. Yeah.
I have one more question though. But is it not so, okay, we do this symptom, right?
A little slower.
We use the symptom
Yeah.
of the fear of dogs
Right.
to work everything out. My question is I guess more if the underlying root is not dealt with.
We got you saying causality. What's the underlying root? Right. So now, is that a good question? It's a very good question. In other words, if the kid, if dad, mom, and the boy have resolved the fear of dogs, have they resolved everything about all the relationships? Why would anybody think that, except J. Hugh, who said, that's all therapists do. Because the contract is, they come in with a fear of dogs. So you stay with, they define the problem. The problem is the fear of dogs. No fear of dogs, goodbye. And what you're asking is, why would we say goodbye? Maybe we should say hello. Now that we're not dealing with the pragmatics, anybody want to know something about themselves? You want to know something, Dad, about your relationship with your father and what made you shy away from your kid? You want to know something about your relationship with your mother and how you decided to mother this boy? Do you want to talk about your relationship as a couple? And Haley's response, and this is the damage that he did a lot of good, but the damage of this is, no, therapists can't do that. That's an abuse of the parents, because the parents only want it. See, the idea is the clients know what they need. Now, if you think about the unconscious, it's pretty likely that people don't really know what they need. They know what they feel they want right now, but we need to have a different way of thinking about them. They're deeper in the forest than us, so we have a different way of thinking. And we could say to ourselves, well, now that your kid is you've succeeded in solving that. What else can we do for you? What questions have come up for you? You know, when you talked, when you went away for that weekend, did you have some questions about how you got into that mess to begin with? And you know, and she says, oh, I know why I got into the mess, because he listens to his mother all the time. His mother criticizes me. And so he said, like his mother, you know, you're married to this schlepper, so naturally your kid is a schlepper like his mother. And he keeps listening to us, oh, so would you like us to help you with that, right? So then, oh boy, you know, you can say, well, the father says, I didn't tell you this, but I was terrified of horses when I was small, and Sigmund Freud treated me. Because I had something that was bothering me. Oh, well, now that you're free of the pragmatics, would you like to look into the subjective parts of your work? Does that sound like a bad thing to do? It's very unpopular. It's very unpopular. Does it sound like a bad thing to do? Why? Right? In other words, you would say, and this is what you say, now that we've solved this part of it, right? This part is the reality part of it. There's another whole set of meanings that you may now be free to engage in looking at because you have been freed of the pragmatics. And we're going to take a look at what those might be. Yeah.
You're just moving from theoretical to practical, as a clinician. This brings up, at least for me, it brings up the challenge of someone, a client comes with a presenting problem where they say, this is what I'm paying you to do for me, yet often you see that there is more going on, or maybe perhaps it's just a symptom. So the question is the contract between the client and the therapist such that you're supposed to just provide them what they want?
Right.
Or are you there to provide them what they need, which may not be what they want?
Right.
That comes up, at least for me, it comes up.
Right.
Especially with adolescents who
Right.
very often don't know what they want, or they think they want this.
Right. So here we are in the 21st century, and we say to ourselves, clients and therapists make a contract. And what I'm going to suggest to you is that that's looking at a very small part of what happens. A contract is a way, you know, where you guys learn a lot about contracts, right? So a contract is a way of concretizing some part of a relationship, not all of the relationship, some part of the relationship. If you look at the shutafim, you know, the shutafut, the partnership, that's a very complex thing. Why is it so complex? Because you're dealing with two different people, and they're concretizing some aspect, but not all aspects of the relationship. So when a client comes in, they make a relationship with us, some of which is spoken of as a contract. That's the kind of focus. Is it exclusive? Why would it be exclusive? Is it all that's available now? Maybe. Right? In other words, they say, could we work on the boys' feet and dogs first? You say, well, here they are. They're not lying on the couch. They have this kid who's afraid of dogs. Let's go for that first, because that's the gate that's open. Right? The contract is, we want to start with this gate. So you're saying, you probably know something about yourselves. Probably not everything, because I don't know everything about myself. But let's give that a try. Let's go through that gate first. So we go through the gate, and they say, we're very happy that we've solved this. Okay, and that exhausts your relationship with them? Why? That's what they do at the beginning. Something else has happened now that they've succeeded. So one would say in the 21st century, renegotiate the contract. Okay, you can talk that way. But you can say, listen, things changed between you, and does it give you some new thoughts? Or would you like to know my thoughts? You know, about what else might happen? Is that reneging on the contract? Why? Right? It's a relationship. A contract is not part.
You feel this is what is best for you.
So what?
You feel like, let's say you have a teenager who's smoking pot.
Right.
So I know that it's not good for him to be, at least to be continuing with that path. But he doesn't, that's not what he's looking for right now to be.
Right.
So, you know, I'm thinking of the two parts of the brain. One saying, what's best, one is working with him, where he is now, and the other is, okay, what's good for him.
Right.
Well, sort of, maybe that's like parental, or maybe that's not how much you're thinking as a clinician, so that's why.
Right.
It's not just, you know, now versus later, it's also the client. You have said.
See, when you say somebody's a client, that's part of who they are. They're also a human being, which is a little broader than being a client. And you're also a human being, which is a little broader than being the other side of the contract. And there's an aspect of the relationship that's called the contract, which is where we put our focus at the beginning. So now you're asking about an adolescent as if you could treat an adolescent without a family. Let's assume that's right. So he says, look, part isn't the problem. The problem is I need to change schools. Okay. So he's saying, this is the gate. Let's start with changing schools. You say, well, let's hear about the school. You say, well, this is not the right school for this kid. So we're going to help him to change schools. And when he's changed schools and he's happier, and then you say to him, is that all? Right? In an open way. You say, well, you got to know me, I've got to know you. Should we talk about anything else? And if it's a good moment, the kid would say, well, I don't have anything in mind, but maybe you do, because it's a relationship. So you could call it renegotiating the contract, you could call it being a match. It's an easier way to think about it. And you say, well, you know, I have to say that marijuana, your use of marijuana troubles me, because I wonder, these are my thoughts, not yours, but I have the thought that maybe you're trying to treat something that's bothering you, because marijuana is an extraordinarily useful way of quieting things down. And if you happen to have had post-trauma, it's the only way to quiet things down. Maybe you're treating post-trauma, and so maybe it's not bad for you. Maybe it's what you need, and society hasn't gotten it yet. Or maybe you feel things inside of you that trouble you, not connected to school. And if we talked about them, you might find a way to master them without something external. And the kid says, well, that was a very interesting idea, and goodbye. So you say to yourself, for now. In other words, you've left the door open. Was it good to leave the door open? Did you force the door open? Did you, you said, look, you're with another human being. The other human being you're with has some thoughts. You don't have to hear him. He says, no, just leave me alone. Well, so you say to yourself, this wasn't such a great relationship, right? Because if he's not interested in how I think, it's a limited relationship. It might be limited, it might not be. But it's a very good question, you see, because that's going to trouble you every time you see a client. So what's my role? What role have you created together? And within it, there are two human beings in the role, or 4 or 5, depending. And what are we doing aside from what we define? Because that's a relationship. A relationship is too far, so confusing each other. We're not going to know a whole lot about it. But it's, so we put certain things in brackets and focus on them, but we know that that's not all. So when you change something, now, if you look at the Welter and you say, okay, so little Stuart stopped being afraid of the dogs. What might have been his drive, right? And it could have been that he was attracted to his father. Little boys are sometimes attracted to their fathers, and sometimes to their mothers. When they're attracted to their mother, it's called Oedipus. When they're attracted to their fathers, it's called the opposite of Oedipus, which in the early 20th century, when people wanted to say opposite in German, they used a metaphor from photography and talked about the positive and the negative. So it's the other side that's called negative. It's not a value judgment. It's like a negative in photography. For those of you who remember films, there aren't any negatives these days. Digital. It's the other side of it. And let's say that his way of being attracted to his father is trying to be connected to his father, who's an expert in dogs, but in a limited way. So he's afraid of dogs. And let's say that he feels that he's guilty for being attracted to his father. And so his conscience says that's a bad thing. And he restrains himself from punishing himself and staying in the house the whole time. Because he's only afraid of dogs. He's not, castrating himself. He's not ruining his whole world. He's focusing it in the same place that it started. So you have a compromise in the inner world. And the repetition is that it's repeated all the time, but only that. In other words, not everything is repeated, just that. So you could say about the boy, And you can make the same map about the father, and the same map about the mother, and say, these are complicated people, and we've touched on a small part of it, and if the symptom involves the inner meanings, then you have an opportunity outside of the pragmatic meanings to look at the inner meanings and say, you want to talk to me, Dad, about your father, and about what went on with your father? We could do that. Now we can do it, not before you were distracted. So one doesn't, the pragmatic meanings and the subjective meanings don't exclude each other, right? They're all part of the same complex human beings. They all could have a place in the relationship, and that makes life complicated. So now, what we're going to do after we hear one announcement about administration is that we're going to break into small groups. The men will come with me, the women will stay here with Rivka. And the way we'll do it is a way of working that was created in Tavistock in England, which I think is useful. For the first 20 minutes, you'll break into pairs. The only reservation about the pairs is probably not in the same family. So, find somebody else. It just will be too complicated according to this map. But choose somebody, and you'll talk about something that happens in my family where I can say it seems to have a pragmatic meaning. A pragmatic means it keeps happening all the time. The example would be that a 16-year-old keeps coming home with bad grades, or a 9-year-old. And you say, okay, when he comes home with bad grades, what happens afterwards? Not what caused it, but what happens. And try to map how the family runs around the bad grades of this kid, or whatever you find in your family. Choose your own family if you can. If it's hard, so use your neighbor. Then, after you've seen the pragmatic, try to map what might be inside. Right? Try to map the inside, so these have an exercise about seeing the inside and the outside together. And then the rest we'll explain as we go along. And one last
Is it
one.
better to use family of origin, going back to our parents, or is it better to use our nuclear family now?
Whichever gate is open, right? I mean, you don't klutz. Do something that isn't going to make you klutz.